here. Welcome everyone to this month's installment of the Intentional Success webinar series. I'm your host, Tom Stimson. Today, we are going to talk about something really important, which is proposals and price. We're going to revisit this word price, and we're going to put price in a new context in here because I think it's going to help a lot of you get your head around how we should be presenting our offers to do business with people. So we are going to talk about prices and estimates and quotes and budgets and all the stuff that goes with that. I'm going to reframe the experience of presenting an offer to our customers in the right context in the right way. As I said, I'm your host, Tom Stimson. I'm president of Stimson Group. For those of you who are new, and we've always got new folks, thank you for being here. I work exclusively with the owners and management teams of live event related companies, production rental companies. I do work with manufacturers and distributors and all that kind of stuff, but I primarily focus on the people who do shows for a living. I'm an old show person. I get it. This is my happy place. That's why I like to work with you guys. And everything I talk about is really aimed at you. Now, lots of other people are using it and following along as well because they're finding it works for their business as well. As you heard, we are being recorded, and I will go and check and say, yes, indeed, we are recording. It'll be available at the end of the day. You'll get an email to remind you of where to find that. Questions, Q&A box. Thank you. Comments, chat box. Talk to each other, introduce yourself, say, hey, where are you watching from? Everybody would like to know that. We get a pretty wide audience of folks around the world. We'll see who we have today and who picks it up and watches it later. So thanks everybody again for being here. So how to write a proposal that isn't about price? Well, aren't proposals all about price? We're going to tell them what you're going to do. We're going to tell them what it's cost. I mean, that's the whole point, right? Has it ever occurred to us that we can tell people what it costs before we ever send them a proposal? And gosh, how much easier if life would be if we never had to write those proposals? Because we can just say, hey, here's what the price is going to be. And they're going, well, there's no way we're ever going to use you. And they'll just move on and quit wasting our time. But that's not really how it all works. And it's always important to err on the side of helping the other person, the buyer in this case, or the agent, find their way, take that journey through the process that's going to get them what they need. And they come in with expectations that are probably different from yours. And that's something that we need to unpack here today. So why am I doing this webinar? Here's a couple facts. Most customers are underqualified to tell you what they need. So they ask for pricing instead. And I think this is the first mistake that sales folks make, is they assume that if somebody doesn't ask for something specific, they don't know what they want, and they're just kicking tires around. But the fact is, they don't know how to ask. We're in a technical industry. I mean, we all speak differently. Matter of fact, everybody on this call uses different words to mean the same thing. Imagine how our customers feel when they're talking to us. So they're not really well qualified for that. But what's the thing that all suppliers have in common is there's a price. So I can come in and ask about a price for something. That doesn't make me a price shopper, right? So we need to reframe that thinking that this is part of the process of the buyer experience that we need to understand. Not every pricing request needs a proposal, right? We rush to write proposals that take a time and money, use up a lot of resources. We got to talk to project managers. We're texting people on show site, asking them questions to get a proposal out when in fact a proposal is probably not even appropriate at this point. So I want to be very careful about when we decide to send a proposal, make sure that that's appropriate. We'll talk a little bit about that today. And then the last thing, well, it's not the last thing, but the third thing on this list that makes today's webinar important is we are still trying to sell things without a budget. And everyone tells me, oh, I always ask the client for a budget, and they say, oh, we don't have one, or that's not how we do business. I don't care. Everyone has a budget. We need to get better at extracting what those budget assumptions are on the buyer's end so that we can meet those expectations not quote something that's stupid high or stupid low, okay, and scare them away, because both of those will do that. So we've got to work harder on getting a budget. And when we don't have a budget, I've got some techniques in this program to talk about how do we do all of that. So moving forward, so start with some marketing 101. We have to understand our channels, because I'm going to say this all through the rest of the webinar: end customers, agencies, and B2B. End customers are the corporations, associations, institutions that we do business with who write us a check, right? They're the economic buyer. We may deal with different people along the way, but we are doing end customer work when the end customer writes us a check. An agency is a reseller, is somebody who buys on behalf of an end customer, or maybe another agency. It gets complicated. So a producer, a destination management company, an event planner are all agents who might be writing you a check, but their customer is the end customer, right? And many of us do a lot of agency work. That's a big part of what we do. And then B2B, of course, is the transactional trade customer, right? So it could be any supplier who is involved in the things that I just described, doing work for end customers or agencies. There are going to be multiple suppliers in that value chain. That is a trade customer. The the local restaurant that calls you is not a trade customer. They're an end customer. They just happen to be a really small one. Make sense? All right. So now we've got that out of the way. Let's talk about this terminology. Okay. Price, estimate, quotes, proposals, agreements, budgets. What am I talking about here? Price is what you charge for an item. I know we throw the word price out all the time. I'll get you a price for that show, but the price for the show is a lot of smaller prices added up together. So technically a price is what we charge for an item. What is your price for this item? There's a correct answer for that. An estimate is a partial solution based on incomplete information. It's generally a sum of prices, okay, with assumptions, but we don't have all the information to do an estimate. But we can say, hey, I can estimate that this would cost this range. And an estimate should always be a range. If it's not a range, you just shot yourself in the foot. We'll talk more about that. A quote, okay, which is different from an estimate, is a response to a qualified agent's RFP. A quote is what we give a reseller. And there are some qualities about quotes that are different than proposals, which is how we sell to an end customer. So a proposal is a summary of all your recommendations on how to apply the client's budget. A quote is a response to an agent's RFP, where they often don't give us a budget, and a quote is not going to close the deal either, which will become apparent as we're talking about this. Now, an agreement, which I mentioned sometimes, but I don't formally talk about it, but I'm going to talk about it today, because sometimes we don't even need a proposal. Sometimes we can go from an estimate, a general understanding of what we're trying to accomplish, and an agreement to get started based on some parameters. So an agreement is a tool to start work and ongoing relationships. Agreements would have been very handy at the beginning of the pandemic when you guys were selling your first streaming event and you sold the event and then realized there was 6 weeks of work before the event that not only did you not sell, it was much bigger than you anticipated. And you wouldn't know what the event was going to be until you did that pre-production work. So you sold the event without actually knowing what it was going to be. So an agreement would have allowed us to do the pre-production work that would help us create the budget for the event. Right. So we did things in the wrong order because, well, we're show people. We've always sold the show, but now we're selling the thing that starts well before the show. And most of you, thankfully, have continued to do that. So keep that up. Budget. And we all use the word budget to describe the order that we just put into Flex, IntelliVent, R2, whatever. Oh, that's in the budget, right? The budget is actually what the customer is willing to spend. It's what they have set aside for what it is that you're going to do. Now, the customer's budget for the entire event versus their budget for travel versus their budget for food and beverage versus their budget for production and budget for AV. Okay, these are all budgets, and clients can change budgets and they can move the money around. Yay. Very important in what we're going to talk about today. So customers can change their budget. You, however, don't need to change your price. And that's an important thing to take away from here today. So for the right fit and the right solution, many buyers will reconsider their budget, right? Because this is why customers choose you. Look, they look at your fit, okay? If your fit and your solution justify or warrant your price, they're probably going to do business with you, okay? You, on the other hand, are also choosing customers. If your customers fit, do they fit? Are they buying what you're selling? Are they easy to do business with? Okay. Are they going to allow you to make a profit? You'll do business with them, right? The intersect between those two things is a clear budget, right? So having a budget makes all of this work. And if the client's initial budget isn't enough to get the fit and solution that they see in you, they may reallocate some budget, raise some budget to get there. All right. Pricing inquiries. So going back to those 3 channels we talked about, we're going to get a lot of inquiries that start with the question of pricing, right? People will call up and say, hey, I just need a price to help me develop the budget, right? Or I need a price. I need the best deal I can get, but I can't tell you how much I want to spend. And where the budget is secret. We see this a lot, especially from less professional amateurish agency buyers. We see this very often. And the third type of pricing inquiry says, we have a budget and we want to spend it wisely. Can you help me? And obviously that's the ideal situation. That's what we want. But we have to learn how to leverage the first 2 so that we can get to the third one. Because all of these people are the people who have a budget and want to spend it widely started off asking, I just need a price to help me develop a budget. How do we know this? If you ask customers, particularly end customers, what's the path that they took to where they actually called you, you're going to freak out. It's wild, right? They're in a meeting. Somebody says, well, we should have a sales meeting. We haven't had one for a while. And somebody says, oh, well, if we did that, then we could do this, this, and this. And then somebody else says, hey, let's go to Palm Springs this time. And somebody says, well, I wonder what that costs. And they start throwing out numbers and anecdotes that they've learned over the years. And maybe they go talk to somebody down the hallway. They start guessing at prices. And then they realize, well, if we're really going to do this, we better get some better data. So they talk to a professional. Now, that professional could be an outside agent, an event planner or producer that they work with. It could be an internal planner or producer that they work with, or they might have to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, hey, can you help us figure this out? And what happens then? They get a reality check. No, you can't do all of that for $150,000. What you're describing probably costs $500,000. Oh, well, then I guess we better figure out what's really important to us. They go back and formulate their needs. They start getting some estimates from venues and places like that, and they get another reality check. So they narrow their needs and they refine their budget. And finally, they realize that they have to develop an RFP and have a very specific ask for what they're doing if they want to get the best price. And then they start talking to suppliers, which is where you come in. So you get them a proposal or a quote, and they take that back to their agent that they talked to at the beginning, says, is this a good deal? Should we go with these people? And they say yes or no. Right? You're missing out a huge amount of the opportunity to develop this, right? Because you're showing up here at the end. There we go, here at the end. So that's not the right place to be. It may be all we get sometimes, and our marketing may bring buyers in at this point, but where we really want to be is earlier in the conversation. Or at least have advocates that are the people that are bringing information earlier in the conversation, right? Strategic partners, referrals, advocates inside of the customer base, because that's going to help us. But if we can get ourselves into this earlier part of the conversation, be the company, be the person that your client calls when they're thinking about having an event so they don't waste a lot of time and energy, then you will start to learn about this process that happens in the middle between formulating the needs and narrowing it down and developing an actual budget. So when somebody calls you, when an end customer calls you and says, hey, we want to do an event, you say, what's the budget? So, well, we haven't figured one out yet. we have to ask some questions, because maybe they're back here at the beginning of the process, or maybe they have an RFP and they've been told not to tell you what the budget is because you'll get a better price. Okay. That's going to affect what you do next. So understanding that there's a lot of stuff that goes on to get to us, okay, so that we can have this conversation about budget and scope and all the other things, so that we can eventually develop a proposal or an agreement, we need to know what's actually going on. Now, to help you to get better at that middle space between the first professional and the RFP, developing that budget, you're going to need some tools. And the one tool you most definitely need, and I'm going to jump up and down until all of you have it. I've been talking about this for years, but now I'm going to show you exactly where it fits into the process, is you need that lookbook for budget examples. Now, a lookbook can mean a lot of things. If you're in the creative world, you know what a lookbook is. Here's samples of things of designs and things to represent what we're capable of doing. You need the same thing for your events, right? You need to be able to say, here's a picture of a business meeting for a one-day event. Okay, you need to budget $12,000 or $15,000 to do this. And the customer says, well, why is there a range? It says, well, it depends on your agenda. It depends on the venue. It depends on the time of year. Oh, okay, that's helpful information. Is there a cheaper time of year? That's an excellent question. I'm glad you asked, right? But having this lookbook and being able to frame the conversation and say, hey, here's the budget for a week-long event. Here's a gala banquet, here's a gala banquet with more budget, okay? We're going to start to pull information out of these people, get an idea of what their budget range is. They go, oh, well, we don't have a $100,000 budget, but I like the custom look stuff. Well, do you like the stock scenery look? No, it doesn't look right for our event. Okay, great. So you've got a budget that's less than 100,000 and more than 40,000. Awesome. Let's ask some more questions, right? This is a much better conversation than guessing in a proposal what it's going to take to win their business. And you could do this for all the types of work that you do. It doesn't take nearly as long as you think it will. I know you're freaked out about this right now, but this is not hard. This is 80% of the business you do fits into probably 3 buckets like this. Okay. You could probably brainstorm all of these in a matter of minutes, maybe 30 minutes, and then you're going to collect some photographs. Maybe you'll have to shoot some stuff that you haven't shot before, so that you'll have it and you can build the lookbook, and then you can constantly add to it as you do more events or get better photographs. Okay. You can update the budget ranges, as pricing changes, as we move, what you would have done in 2019 for a week-long business meeting was probably less than what you would charge for it now. Great, budgets get to change, but we're going to give the customer better information so that we can follow the process that needs to be followed at the next step. Very important tool. Get to work on it. That's your homework from this webinar. Start doing that now, because you will use it. It's going to be a lifesaver. All right. Now, meat of the webinar. Let's talk about prices, estimates, quotes, and then, oh yeah, proposals, prices. A price has little or no context. It's a number with a line item for a product. It's well defined in terms of what the product is, but there's no context on when and where and how the product is going to be used. Okay. And you also have some things where there is no standalone price, because it always goes with something else. So you can't put a price on everything. What you often do is have an item that has a bunch of accessories that all get rolled into that price. There's just too many variables. Pricing is a dangerous place to be. Throwing out prices is not healthy, but I'll give you some tools to do it a little bit better, a little bit more safely. So when answering price questions, somebody says, what's the rental rate for a wireless microphone? Awesome. Thank you for asking. When you hire us for an event, wireless mics can add as much as $80 to $200 per day for each unit that you put on. Why the huge range? Difference in quality, difference in duration. These are just numbers to help you understand what the rental rate might be. Well, what about a wireless mic by itself? Tell me why you need one just by itself. Okay, now we're going to start getting some useful information, because maybe this is a person who doesn't understand that you actually do events for a living instead of just running parts and pieces. All right, so we don't want to chase them off. We want to understand where they're coming from. All right, another popular question: how much does an LED wall cost? That's what I call a how long is a piece of string question. You need an answer followed by a question. A basic LED wall will add a $10,000 to $30,000 to an event budget. Tell me more about what you want to do with an LED wall. So always remember to append a question to your answer, because you need to get more information to figure out where to go next. Answer a question with a question, but first give them some helpful information, give them a helpful response. And then everybody's favorite, can you send me your price list? Sorry, no, I can't, but I can walk you through the process of how we help you develop your budget. Would that be helpful? Well, no, what I'm looking for is this. Great, now we're going to get more information, right? So the whole point of this is to get more information. So pricing questions are usually an indication that we need to get something deeper, get to the deeper question sooner, right? If the first thing they hear is when you ask a pricing question, they hear you shuffling through your papers to look something up, you've lost them, right? You're now the pricing person forever. They're going to call you anytime they need a price, and you're never going to convert them into a potential buyer. So estimates are different. Tell me about estimates, Tom. Okay. An estimate, I'm Starkey here. An estimate is a trap to get you to give them a quote without enough information. Most people looking for estimates are looking to snare you into something that they're going to come back later and say, well, you told me it was only going to cost 30,000 bucks. Yeah, but you didn't tell me it was outdoors in the middle of the day in the rain, right? So estimates, they're dangerous, okay? There's no duration to them when you give an estimate. They're non-binding. Without a purchase order or deposit or an agreement, the numbers are really kind of meaningless, okay? You're treating it like a price request. So we have to do something similar with them, in that we've got to also look at them as a, watch my computer slow down here. If somebody comes to you and says, hey, look, I need a quick estimate for this project so I can find out what our budget is, right? Let's get back here. That's the popular question, right? Awesome. Sure, I can help you with that. Tell me more about your event while I open up my sample file, which is your lookbook, right? So estimates are a stepping stone. The estimate question is a stepping stone to the lookbook. Okay, so you can start pulling stuff out and say, hey, well, here's a typical event that has that in it, and here's what that costs. Does that help you? An agency client asking the same question, I need a quick estimate so I can pitch this project, because they need to sell it, right? Same thing. Tell me more about your event while I open up my sample file. Okay. Here are some retail prices for projects. Maybe there's projects that we've done with them in the past that we can remind them of. It's like, hey, we did this project in 2018. It was $150,000. Today, you probably need to budget closer to $200,000, but is that what you're looking for? Right? So again, we give them some helpful information. We ask the follow-up question and keep things going. And then can you put together an estimate of what it would take to do what I'm about to describe, which is somebody's about to vomit out an RFP to you? Okay, awesome. I'm all ears. I got my pencil ready. Tell me more about your event, and I will explain the best way to proceed to get you what you need. In other words, I'm not to give you an estimate. I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to give you an estimate. I'm going to tell you what the next step is to get you what you need. Okay, I'm going to be as helpful as I can, but I want to steer you in the direction where we eventually start having an open conversation. You tell me what's really on your mind, and I'm going to be as helpful as I possibly can. Right now, whenever you're talking pricing and estimates, you're going to get immediate objections, right? That's kind of goes with the territory. I call these single level objections because they can usually be knocked down with one response. So a single level objection is, I can get that for half the price at XYZ company. Yes, I know you can. I'm not sure what's included in their price. Their $80 microphone may not be the same as my $200 microphone, but they're a good company to call when you're looking for low prices on individual items. Okay. Tell me what's important to you for this item. There's the question, right? We already have a quote for half that amount and one for twice that amount. So they're shopping around. They're getting numbers that are all over the map, which says way more about them than it says about you. So great response to that is, look, I understand how that's happening. You should be investing more in technical design so that you can better dial in your needs so that you can get more helpful quotes from your buyers, right? We see this a lot in like in association blind bid things where they get 12 companies to send in a quote and they're all over the map. It just means the RFP was not great, right? People need to write better RFPs. Sellers need to ask better questions, right? We need to bridge that gap a little bit. And then my favorite, I'm going to need you to sharpen your pencil on this one. It's probably some old codger like me. He said, look, let's be clear that the more precise your needs, the easier it is for me to value engineer. The best place for me to start on this is tell me what your budget is, and I'll tell you how to get the most bang for the buck on that budget. All right. So we don't need to play that game. If you're having to guess to win a piece of work, you have not done enough salesmanship. All right. Quotes. Quotes are to agencies, right? They're to a middleman. They're to a reseller. A quote is often used to group a bunch of things, a bunch of estimates together to make the price package more palatable. Quotes infer that there's going to be a competitive comparison. We don't quote to somebody who's going to hire you anyway. We sort it all out. We come to an agreement. We get a check, right? We might do a proposal if they have to share it with their client. Okay. A quote is often used to do these things. They infer that you're going to compete. And by definition, they strip all the value out, right? It's very difficult for you to convey value, your value proposition in a quote, because a quote is really about formal pricing for somebody who's going to resell it. Now, having said all that, and having given you all these admonitions about budgeting, let's talk about how to prepare for a situation where I actually do need to write a quote. Okay. When a reseller, an agency is asking you to develop a quote, or they may say proposal or get me a budget, they'll use all of those terms interchangeably. You understand what you are is in the quoting process. First question I'm going to ask is tell me where you are in the decision process. Well, we're going to talk to several vendors. We haven't really had that discussion yet. Okay. So you're shopping. I'm going to ask, how will you and your team decide how to proceed? What's the process you're going to use? What are your decision criteria? Well, we're not looking for the cheapest. We want a good company and we want a good price. I said, great. Thank you for that. Okay. Talk about their RFP. It only covers a narrow set of the things the event will need. Who's taking care of these other things? What other suppliers are going to be involved in this? Because that's going to influence my scope of work, right? Get some answers to this. If they're not forthcoming with this, say, well, then, I've got an incomplete scope of work. I don't have enough parameters here to address this. And then you might inject at that point that your company can support a lot of needs for this event other than what you've asked for in this RFP. Can I tell you more about what we do to see if we can participate more deeply in this event? All right. So being asked to do a quote is not victory. Being asked to do a quote, it means that we need to begin some heavy lifting on qualifying this opportunity, doing the best work that we can to extract enough information so that we have a working budget so we can move on. So here's some more about quotes, right? Now, quotes are a potential waste of time and resources, and I quoted for a living. All of my customers for the 15 years that I sold were agencies. It was always an exercise. It was always about getting in there with the best price so that you could get the job and then you would sort it out later. But it's a real potential waste of time and resources if you don't know what you're doing. So choose what you quote very carefully. You need to vet the buyer, the partner, as much as they need to vet you. Okay. Quotes, the process of quoting is usually a stepping stone in the process of getting to the next round. All right. So if your quote is accepted, that doesn't mean that you're going to get the job. It just means that you're going to get to write a proposal. Okay. On something that may not look exactly like what you quoted. So be aware that quotes aren't necessarily the piece of work that's going to be awarded. They are a representation of that's going to level the playing field while they consider the different suppliers. And then there's going to be another round of quoting, or there's going to be the actual, okay, let's sit down. I want your pricing structure here, but I want to apply it this way, which is completely different and a little bit dishonest, right? I quoted in context of your RFP. You're now asking to use those same numbers in a completely different context. That's a little disingenuous. However, let's keep talking, right? So eventually you're going to need a proposal or an agreement to close the deal, but this is kind of the process that you're going to go through to get there. Finally, proposals. Proposals address specific needs and subjective solutions, right? A specific needs is we need enough sound in the ballroom for everybody to hear. A subjective solution is that it needs to be optimized for voice instead of for music. Yes, but we have a band. If I optimize it for voice, that is better than optimizing it for music. For years, we sold, oh, we have a concert sound system. That's better than what those guys are quoting. Theirs is just for voice. Well, you know what? You know what voice sounds, you know what a lectern sounds like on a concert sound system? It sounds like garbage, right? So a subjective solution is we're going to give you a sound system that is optimized for the spoken word, right? Which means it's better than a concert sound system. That's a subjective solution. A proposal can have estimated prices in it, okay? I can say, here's the baseline price. These are the things that are going to have to affect your budget that you need to take into consideration, okay? And it's going to have to do with timing, union rules, venue requirements, all sorts of things that are probably not in your control at this point. But that's okay. It's a proposal. The proposal includes how we're going to solve that problem. How are we going to get that information? We're going to do a site survey. We're going to update the proposal. We're going to reallocate your budget. I'm not going to ask you to spend more money. I'm going to ask you to spend it differently. Your budget is fine. Oh, great. A proposal needs a budget for context. It's very difficult to write a proposal without the customer having a budget, because a proposal is a recommendation how to use the customer's budget or how they should use their budget. Now, very important in proposals is to have inclusions, exclusions, and assumptions, right? You know, your basic sound system includes this. It does not include this. Okay. We are making the assumption that we are allowed to do all the rigging. If we have to use the in-house company to do the rigging, that's going to change things, right? So all of those things need to be called out in your scope of work. Estimates are always based on assumptions, okay? Some assumptions are going to show up in your proposal. Make sense? So it's very hard to write a proposal that is a not to exceed price unless what we not to exceed is the customer's budget. So some of the differences between a quote and a proposal, because they sound like we're doing the same thing, but we're presenting them a little bit differently because it's a different channel, right? A reseller is a different channel than an end customer or an end customer's agent. You know, somebody who works inside if the end customer is going to write us a check, we're going to write a proposal. If the agent is going to write us a check, we're going to write them a quote. Quote starts with deadlines. Here's how long this quote is good for. Here's when you have to make decisions by. Here's the things that we agreed upon when we were talking earlier. Here's the stuff that has to happen in order to maintain this price point. Here are the next steps. You need to approve this quote, and then we will move into the production process, which will better define how you're going to spend your money. We give an overview of the project that we talked about. We do the inclusions and exclusions that are appropriate for that. We give an itemized response because this is a buyer who wants to see lines. They may not need to see every single line, but they want to see, here's the major components of the sound system. Here's how many wireless mics you're going to get, blah, 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 and a price. Okay, so line mute for most of you, right? It's going to look like a technical quote. And then the pricing summary, which brings all the parts and pieces into a one-page sum up. Addenda are great. You can put some marketing materials in there. No one's going to look at them. Agencies never look at that stuff. But if you feel like you have to put it in there, that's where you put it. Proposals, on the other hand, okay, have a little bit of marketing. We are talking to somebody who's going to be a transparent partner with us or wants to be. We're going to start with who we are. Here's who we are. Here's the business profile that you're hiring here. Here's an overview of your event. Okay. Here's some deadlines that are important to consider, you know, when you're deciding on when to sign off on this. Here are the next steps to signing off. Now let's talk about the scope of work. Here's the scope of work for these areas that we discussed. Here are some options. Very important in proposals. There's a baseline requirement in your scope of work. I need sound for 500 people. I need lighting for a 40-foot wide stage that's 12 feet deep with award winners walking across. I need IMAG. I need 2 screens for high visibility, right? So, and I need some scenic treatment. There's your baseline. Now, The client also was very interested in some other things like adding more lighting to put color around the room, okay? Enhancing the streaming experience, right? So we have money for that. Maybe there's a $350,000 budget, 250,000 goes to baseline, $50,000 goes to the enhancements in the visual experience, the room experience, scenic lighting, okay? And $50,000 goes to enhancing the streaming experience, developing a platform, a landing page, an archive, right? That's how we do our options. We give them the budget summary. We show them how to confirm electronically, hopefully. Wet signatures are kind of a thing in the past. And then all that addenda stuff that you want to include. Your marketing material might actually get looked at in this situation, which is great. And just remember, you're writing to different people. A quote is to a business agent, a proposal is to an economic buyer. They're going to assess you differently. All right. When to write a proposal. Couple of criteria here. You need to meet one of these criteria. Okay. If you have a professional RFP from a qualified buyer or buyer's representative that you've discussed at length, you have a budget range, a clear understanding of the decision process and the timetable, write a proposal. Or if you have a clear scope of work based on a discovery process between you and the customer, in other words, you developed the RFP on behalf of the customer, and you have a verbal commitment to a budget range saying, yeah, if we can get these numbers in between 150 and 170, I'm pretty sure we can get this through. Great, now you can write a proposal. And it's exactly how you frame that. If I put this proposal together, I think this is going to have between $150,000 and $170,000. Is that going to meet your criteria? Well, yeah, I'd like it to be more 150 than 170. He said, of course you do. Okay, so I'm going to show you how to get the baseline 150 and real options at the higher price. Let me show you what that means. So if you write a proposal that's based on a budget range, like I just described, use the basic proposal template that I shared with you earlier, present the baseline scope of work and a not to exceed price, which is 150. Here is a option for the remainder of your budget on how to invest that if you choose to use it. Here are some enhancements that we would recommend that would add value to your event, give you a couple of choices, right? Those are legitimate upgrades. They weren't part of the original scope of work. The baseline scope of work is going to meet all their needs. These are enhancements. And that's the best way to treat a budget range. So you will deliver them a proposal with $150 to $170 in it. Now, when not to write a proposal? When an agreement will suffice. Why write a proposal when they say, hey, no, actually, if you can do this for 150, let me see if I can get that extra money. We'll look at that later, but let's get this thing started. Great. I'm going to send them agreement. Okay. I don't need a proposal. I need to go through all that rigmarole. They don't need to go through all of that stuff. I'm going to write a simple agreement. So when you've been collaborating with the client and you both have enough information to move forward, we can formalize that business transaction with a simple agreement. It doesn't include all the details of the project because one, you've agreed on how you're going to share that information. And when the first step is to define the next step of the overall project, agreements are very important. Okay, so agreements come in very handy when there's a lot of pre-production, or we need to do design work in order to get to the final budget because we have to design it first. Okay, so any project that is fluid, it's multi-stage, agreements are very, very helpful here. Oh my God, wouldn't this have been handy 3 years ago, right? So here's an example for an agreement, and you use agreements for, creative and technical design. Content production would be under an agreement. Technical production could be under another agreement, right? So we've got concept, we have deliverables, and then we've got the show could be 3 separate agreements. So a scope of work for budget development. Here's a simple agreement. Okay, we're going to start the budgeting process so that you can make better decisions about what your overall production budget is going to be. It's going to take us 4 to 6 weeks. Here are the deliverables. Okay. And here are the things it includes. I'm going to show you 3 concepts. You're going to pick one. We're going to do up to 2 revisions. I'm going to give you a minimum budget and recommendations on additional spend. My fee for that is $18,000. Now, if you're working with somebody who's got a $2 million show, that fee for that might be $150,000. Okay. It does track, it does get bigger, depending on the size of the event because there's more work involved. So negotiations about budget, not price. If you start the project with a budget, okay, the only negotiating point left is now a scope of work or terms. If the client says we need to reduce the budget, you say, oh, great, I can reduce the scope of work. Here's what I recommend we take out. Okay. Or we can get rid of those corporate terms that says you get to pay me in net 90 days, and maybe you pay me COD and I can get you 10% more buying power, right? So we have a budget. If the customer's budget changes, that's okay. You now get to change your scope of work. It's as simple as that. And it's expected, right? Now, clients can change their budget. You get to change your quote or your proposal, okay? Or you get to change your deliverables. So never write a proposal that comes in higher than the budget, okay? Remember that? Except when you're presenting true options. So a true option is something that is off the table until they choose it. So I'm going to write the $150,000 quote. Here's a $20,000 option for doing a 3-camera stream instead of a 1-camera stream, okay, which is a separate negotiation, right? And we can close that with an agreement, not another proposal. So changing the conversation in negotiations from price to budget is very key to all this. Okay. Well, we need to get a lower price. Well, tell me what's happened to your budget. Okay. All right. RFPs. We're talking about agency work. We're talking about doing quotes to agencies. They're very often about price. Some end customers, associations, some institutions, it's about price. And that's why they're doing an RFP, because they're trying to shop around and get the best price. And this is their tool for doing that. So how do we respond to RFPs that are about price? I'm going to tell you what I've told you before. I'm going to be very explicit about this. When you're responding to an RFP where price is critical, cut out all the bells and whistles. Quote the bare minimum to meet the criteria. Do not put any value add in. Don't put anything in there that looks like I'm going to do this for free, because I want you to sharpen the pencil on your price. Okay. In other words, I want you to be extremely aggressive about pricing, but you want to get as much stuff into the job as possible. So value add, if somebody sees a value add piece in there, and oh, by the way, we'll produce 3 videos for you at no charge, they know that money's hiding in there somewhere. So it doesn't bring any added value. They see it as a trade-off. So make sure you do the bare minimum to meet the criteria. If there's overtime, leave it all out, put an estimate of it in notes. There's a place for footnotes. This is where to use it. Okay. We tell them what the estimate is because we don't want that inflating our number. Okay. Be very detailed with your inclusions and exclusions. Okay. And note that there's an added cost. Okay. You may have an assumption in here that says, hey, our quote for audio includes hook down rigging. Okay. In other words, no top rig, only bottom rig. Okay. If we are required to provide any top rig, there will be additional costs for that. You have to be that explicit. Okay. Put a clause in your quote that says this quote does not represent our opinion about what is appropriate for this project. In other words, you're purely responding to the RFP. You're not putting any value added expertise. And I know sometimes the RFPs are just flat out wrong, but it's a quote. It's not the job you're going to do. It is just the stepping stone to get you to the next point. And you're setting up a relationship where you are going to diligently track and bill change orders. And if you are not a company who's good at tracking and billing change orders, and a lot of that stuff slips through the cracks because it's embarrassing to ask the client for more money, do not do quotes. Get away from RFP work. You have no business doing that. You're playing with fire because you're going to lose your butt, right? So exciting stuff. I think I enjoy the heck out of this. Proposals are a big part of what I talk about with my clients on a regular basis. It's a very exciting time to be doing proposals because the buyer dynamic has changed. Many of our buyers are less experienced and they need our help, Our more experienced buyers are just thrilled that somebody's returning their phone call for a change, because they, you know, my event planner, I'm doing an event in June. Okay. She sent out requests to 15 hotels, got one response. Okay. That's what event planners are going through right now. Right. So just responding to somebody who has a need and spending some time with them is so extremely valuable right now. So you'll have a much easier time of getting budgets out of people if you'll change up some of your processes and procedures to get there. All right. I know there'll be questions. There should be questions. I'm not that complete, right? So get your questions ready, drop them in the Q&A box for me. I would love to answer them. I see a couple there already. Thank you. Let me do some shameless self-promotion here first. Intentional Scalability Masterclass. If you are the owner of your business, okay, you are eligible to come. Contact me. Let's have a quick chat about it. We've got some more seats left. And it'll be a great event for those of you who did not come last year. This is a high return event. There are no sponsors. There's no sales pitches. It's just you, great content, all that good stuff. So this is exactly what you're looking for, an environment where you can talk very frankly and openly, and not have to be careful with your words because somebody's employee is sitting 2 feet away from you. Everybody in the room is an owner. Awesome, awesome experience. I look forward to seeing you there. Surprise, somebody started a podcast, because apparently I have more words than I can put into blog posts. The Intentional Success podcast, the first episode is up. I think another one comes out next week. I don't know the schedule. I have people for that. So get to that and take a look. Please, if you enjoy it or don't enjoy it, leave a comment, leave a rating. Please subscribe. Please share it with others. Podcasts live in a different sharing environment than the other digital marketing that I do. I really need your support. For those of you who have been asking for a podcast for years, here it is. Please help me out, spread this thing around a bit. I'm going to share a lot of things that I don't have. I'm going to go deeper into some of the topics that I write about, and even the webinars. I'm going to give background. I'm going to bring on some guests. It's a little bit of Tom Unplugged. So for those of you who know me up close and personal, it's probably going to be more like that than some of my workshops and some of the other things that you've seen. If you want to catch old webinars, they're all there. Intentional Success Network, pop over there. It's free. There's way more stuff on here than you can find on my website. And anything that if I've worked on it, you could probably type in a keyword and find it over there on Intentional Success Network and capture some of that old stuff and even the more recent stuff. And for those of you that are new to me, hey, what can I do for you? Look, I'm a business advisor. I only work in the live events industry. Very often we start with a business assessment. You know, if I can get a good baseline of where you are, give you some feedback on your business, help you better frame what it is you want to work on, okay, we will start there. We will take that information, do some strategic planning, a little bit of road mapping, and then I'm going to support you through the implementation process, right? You're going to hit some roadblocks. You're going to need to learn some stuff that you haven't done before. That's what I'm here for. I'm a fire hose of information. So if you want to get somewhere faster, I'm a great way to get there. And then along the way, you're going to have some management team that's going to need some coaching. You yourself, the owner, may need some coaching and all of this. I've got all these tools here and I speak your language. So what can I do for you? Well, let's have a conversation about what you need done and I'll show you how it works together. All right. Next webinar, we're going to talk more about selling because it's so important right now, how to sell and deliver a project in customer terms. This is for you people who over deliver, and you know who you are. We're going to stop over delivering. We're going to talk about that next month. Be there. Aloha. All right. Summary. Proposals are primarily for end customers. Remember that. And is based on their budget. We need a budget to write a proposal. They go hand in hand. Quotes are RFP or RFQ driven business, primarily for agency buyers. We always start with bare bones solutions. Proposals are where we convey value, right? Now we want to convey value all through the selling process, but we're going to document the heck out of it in proposals. Estimates are for friends, insiders, people you trust, because we don't want to give an estimate to somebody who's going to use that information inappropriately. If we're going to escalate that opportunity, then we're going to have to do a quote or a proposal or an agreement to get further along in the process. Anytime you get a price request, that should trigger your sales mind to work on getting a deeper engagement. Answer the question, ask a question, find out if there's opportunity there to sit down, do a capabilities pitch, do some introductions, have a meeting. That's where we want to get. This could be the best lead you've ever had if you don't treat it like just a pricing conversation. I hope you got that out of this webinar. All right. Questions here. I'm going to stop the share because, well, who needs to look at PowerPoint? And let's get to some of these questions. All right. Where do we start? Okay. For the person who showed up late, yes, an agent. An agent is a middleman. It's a person who represents the end customers. We have end customers. We have agents, which are probably going to be a producer, technical director, event planner, event management company. That's an agent. So they're that middleman reseller of your services. Yes, the replay, of course, will be available as always. My event in Orlando. What is the name? It's called the Wave Hotel. It's south of the airport, a newer property. It's not near the convention center, by the way. All right, question. Good long one here. Is typical RFP requests that we've been receiving. Detailed budget, including breakdown of costs for the following areas, right? So if they're asking for a detailed breakdown, the question I'm always going to ask is, well, why? So they're looking for a quote, right? They want a quote out of all of this. So we're going to use the quote protocol. It says budget should include all elements, nothing to be billed later. They're asking for no hidden expenses, no surprises. They want a closed end, not to exceed budget. So we need really tight inclusions, exclusions, and assumptions on there so that we know where our job ends and somebody else's begins. If they're worried about things like patch fees, storage and loading fees, sorry, that's on you, right? That's on the venue. So you book the venue. I'm not responsible for any venue charges. I'm going to put that clause in there. All travel costs will be included except for hotel rooms, fine. So they have a lot of specifics here. But again, what we have is a control buyer who may or may not be an agency buyer. They may be just an internal representative for an experienced buyer. And they obviously don't trust. So how do I respond to that? It's the quote protocol. So what I'm looking for when I get an RFP or any kind of a request, whether it's a formal RFP or not, is to decide what's the appropriate response. Okay, if it's a quote, have we asked the questions that we needed to ask about the decision process, the timing, and all that sort of stuff? If it's a proposal, have we had a conversation about budget? Okay, if it is not a proposal, the best it's going to be is a quote. Okay, so quote protocols are necessary. For this particular person asking the question, I know they do a lot of full service production work, content, creative, scenic, audio, video, lighting, rigging, blah, 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 soup to nuts, right? They're very often to get RFPs like this that are going to warrant a quoting process, which is just going to get you to the next round. So you need to do what you can to get to the next round. If you've not done a capabilities pitch for this buyer, okay, you're probably just wasting your time. But thank you for sharing that. There's some good language in there. Another one here said, I have a longtime client that always acts like everything's about price. He never gives us the budget. How can I reset the relationship? Awesome question. So let me think. So resetting the relationship with a person who acts like everything's about price. Okay. Step one, you need to raise your prices. He's going to negotiate anyway. You need something to negotiate with, right? So start raising your prices wisely and show them and be very transparent about it. So here's some prices that have changed. Okay, I need to call this out for you. Here's what I'm going to do to soften the blow, but here are prices that have changed. Number two, start framing budget in advance, okay? So use the word budget often. This sounds like you're going to need at least $150,000 in your budget. Well, I wasn't thinking I'd spend that much. I said, well, tell me more about what you were thinking then, right? Start talking in terms of budget and not pricing, because if you use pricing in your terminology, then they can argue about pricing. It's their budget. They can't argue about their budget. If their budget changes, you just change your scope. So when you do get price pressure from this person, and you will, because this is their nature, always reduce the scope of work in response to price pressure. There are also terms and conditions reductions that you can make, but I would always start with scope of work because agencies rarely have the means to pay you sooner, right? They're usually, waiting for their money. So scope of work is the best place to go. And again, very tight protocol here. Inclusions, exclusions, assumptions have to be spelled out. This is obviously what I call a control buyer. They want you to think that they're the expert and then you aren't the expert. So give them a chance to be the expert on their budget. And I think you'll find a better working relationship. Another question here. Follow up on the other one. What do you think about the client making the production company responsible for the cost out of their control? Well, if the cost is out of your control, you can't be responsible for it, right? So it's like, if the cost is potentially in their control, then I'm going to put it back on them. If you really do have to take on something that is out of your control, you have to do everything you can to research to see how much of your control and how much risk you're actually taking, and you're going to put a price on that. So if I'm doing a quote response where they put in criteria for something that is out of my control, like unknown fees from the venue that the venue hasn't told me about yet, okay, then I'm going to say, here's the baseline product and here are all of my assumptions. The assumptions are there are no unsurprised fees from the venue. If you want me to be responsible for the surprise fees, here's the extra budget you need. It's going to cost you an extra $50,000 and I'll take all those responsibilities off your hand. Just put a price on it. I hate to say it's as simple as that because that is actually a very complex response. But the fact is, taking on risk has a price. And if somebody wants you to take on risk, you just got to learn to put a price on that. So I'm happy to take that risk. Here's what it's going to cost you. Fun question. Thank you. God, boy, you're bringing back memories for me. Tom, we're almost done. Tom, should our documents say quote, estimate, and proposal? Okay, good question. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Now, be sure to change the body of it, the template that you're using, so that the language under next steps is appropriate for a quote, estimate, or proposal. Okay. The deadline language has to be appropriate for the type of document they're sharing with them, good until, and all that kind of stuff. What I really like about changing the title on these documents is going to help your team adjust. Okay. Your customers used to seeing all sorts of stuff from all sorts of suppliers. They probably don't even look at the difference or think about the difference. But if your team thinks about the difference, we're going to be much more aware, much more in the moment as we're having conversations with the customer. So that's actually a very, very good question. And I'm going to squeeze one more in because I can. Is there a better way to send proposals than from Flex? We try and hide prices, but customers keep asking us what each line costs. Man, I'm tearing up here a little bit. Look, in a perfect world, I love Flex and R2 and it's all about, they're very, very valuable tools for our businesses. In a perfect world, I would never, ever send a proposal from your rental management software. That's where you put your numbers together, right? It's like opening up the inside of a calculator and showing it to your customer, okay? Present your solution in terms of scope of work for all your baseline solutions, okay? We've got to get away. I mean, you can itemize enhancements and like, wireless mics, each additional wireless mics will cost X, but you're not going to generate this out of your rental management software. You're going to build a quote in a template. I've shared many templates with you guys before. I'll email me, I'll share it with you again. Most of the proposal problems I see are a direct result of sharing estimates that came out of an inventory management software with our customer. Just stop it. Please just stop it. Unless you're a box rental company, please just stop doing this. You cannot convey value with line items from a rental management software system, okay? Just because it does generate a proposal for you doesn't mean you should use that proposal. It's for crunching numbers. I'm going to get off my soapbox because that's a hot button item and I'm going to get some angry mail. But this is important. If we're going to sell effectively in this new environment that we've been fortunate enough to fall into, we got to let go of some old habits. And that's one of them. So thanks everyone for being here. I sure appreciate you. I'm glad we got to do this together, and I will see you again next month. Cheers.